Good morning, good morning, good morning. This is Robert Frank with Magic12. And this is February the 21st, 2019. And we're reading out of The Amazing World of Kreskin. And I'm going to go ahead and start right with chapter 14 where we left off. And I will continue to read. Okay, chapter 14. Déjà vu, the French term for the illusion of having encountered something before when it is actually being experienced for the first time, is another of those physical mysteries that has been around for centuries and is still not resolved. It has happened to everyone. You walk into a room and you get a feeling that you have been in it before. You have a conversation and there's a strange familiarity about it, as if the words have already been said with someone else. You meet a person and have the strange feeling you've met him before, but no, you can't have. Among other claims, déjà vu has been used in support of reincarnation, and again, gained momentary credence when Bridie Murphy bobbed up in the mid-50s, following the same path of similar reincarnated ladies and gentlemen in the early part of the century. Without reincarnation to confuse the subject, déjà vu is apparently a natural phenomenon. It is sometimes lumped with the occult because it is not understood. Whenever its home should be, it is not ESP. One theory is that upon entering a room, a person sees X number of details, the brain recording them instantly, though unconsciously. A moment later, he sees them consciously, becoming fully aware of them, and feels a strange familiarity about them, and even the possibility that he has seen them before. That theory doesn't quite work for me. The average person well knows what he has seen several seconds later or before. As time goes on, he will see more, but not usually in a frame of familiarity as if he had been in the room previously. He will normally see the room exactly as it is. The theory of déjà vu that I tend to accept involves unconscious memories. A room is entered and the eyes go to a crack in the wall, or a couch is in a position similar to one of past experience. Perhaps the color is the same or close. Sunlight might have faded it, similar to one from past experience. It does not bring back an entire experience, but there is enough of it to churn dormant memories. If it was a positive example, a room from childhood re-entered, not an illusion, why not absolute recognition? Why only a vague familiarity? Most déjà vu experiences are vague and blurred. Déjà vu appears to be somewhat in the same psychic phenomenon area as glossolemia, or speaking in a foreign language. Some religious cults practice a form of it, claiming that it is talk with God. but the words that flow out seem more gibberish than language. I've taped them and remain bewildered by them. However, there are investigated records that are recorded cases where a person, years into life, suddenly began speaking fluid Latin, Greek, or other languages. The mystery of one lady who unexplainably began spouting Greek was traced to childhood. The usual origin: her mother was a cleaner in a Greek Orthodox church and rectory. The child was often around when the priest conversed or said prayers out loud. Under a traumatic condition in late life, she went back to the rectory, again churning dormant memories. Memories of dynamic incidences can be brought back when the subject is wide awake or in a so-called trance, if the imagination is sufficiently stimulated and an association is established. The patient may remember details and even act some of them out, but he is not regressed in the absolute sense of the word. Some doctors still believe there is a therapeutic value in the regression process. However, research by Dr. T.X. Barter of the Midfield Institute in Boston and others indicates that when a person is sent back to a particular day or a part of his life, he'll do an excellent job of inventing what can't be remembered. Incidents developed by regression were researched, and some were particularly true, others were complete fabrications. And Brickley Murphy was among the better fabrications of this century. With amateur hypnotist Maury Bernstein as her guide, Ruth Simmons or Virginia Tighe not only went back to the age of 3 months in this lifetime, but then tunneled centuries into another. She danced jigs reportedly and talked in an Irish brogue, all to the ecstasy of the reincarnationist. Then Life magazine exposed that as a child she had lived in an Irish neighborhood in Chicago. With or without that exposure, for what it meant, Brickley didn't go into enough detail of her previous life to substantiate the slightest possibility that she had ever existed in the land of the leprechauns. Meanwhile, Mr. Bernstein made a modest sum from his bestseller and the subsequent Paramount motion picture, which took even more liberties. The subject of reincarnation remains irresistible to a portion of the public. The Bridie was no doubt returned under other names. Beating Bridie to the literary punch was Patience Worth, otherworld entity for a Miss Florence Limor Curran in 1913. Patience, it was claimed, was an English girl who had lived during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I and thought the automatic writing of Mrs. Kane turned out several books and some poetry. Puritists will say that this is not really a case of reincarnation, but I don't know where else to put it. The credo of the Theo-sophisticated society founded in 1875 is based on reincarnation. H.G. Wells mechanized the whole interesting process in his book, The Time Machine, published in 1901. Actually, the old poltergeist, a first-rate entertainer, is one of much more amusements than any reincarnated folk. The German word means noisy ghost, and he has a colorful, active, juvenile history. A silent ghost is of no use to anyone. Without footsteps or rapping, hurtling objects about, he is rather a waste. Being invisible, supposedly, the only way we can attract attention, like a spoiled child, is to make a nuisance of himself. So the poltergeist is the most material form, slams doors, throws plates across the room, and is in general raises Cain. There is one constant about the mischievous poltergeist. He rarely seems to haunt a house unless children are present. In his Haunted Houses, author Herbert Carrington noted that most poltergeisted dwellings had at least one child in the preteen or early teen stage. Of course, there are barns and abandoned houses and old factories and moors and glens and mountains and bridges and so on, too, said to be inhabited by ghosts. But these seem to be a different species. If one accepts their existence, notably, they are not violent. Perhaps they are weary ghosts. One of the more recent spectacular American poltergeist inhabitations took place in the James H. Herman home on Long Island in New York. The quiet, conservative Catholic family was being disturbed by violent noises and tossed objects. It was a typical example of the German wrath, first recorded at Bringen am Rhine in AD 355. Last appearing in a Breim in 1965 and in Rosenheim in Bolivia in 1967. A few scientists and psychic investigators, including the very knowledgeable Dr. J.G. Pratt, formerly on Dr. Rhine's staff at Duke, visited the house. While Pratt was there, a door opened and a globe flew across the room. In a month's time, Pratt noted 67 unexplained incidences. Several magicians, experts at making things fly, requested permission to visit the house, but the family preferred to remain quiet, though they hosted Edward R. Murrow for Person to Person and Life magazine. The Long Island inhabitation did not break the tradition. The Herman's teenage son, James, was present somewhere in the house each time the poltergeist performed. As usual, the scientists and psychics came up with the same theories. One, the house was occupied by a ghost or spirit that was never laid to rest because of traumatic incident involving his death. Unsettled, unwanted, he demonstrated with hyperactivity. Two, the teenager was releasing an energy force, RSPK, or recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, which caused the disturbance. Three, the adolescent was having a marvelous time with his Frankish tricks. I'm usually inclined to accept number three, but acknowledge the possibility of psychokinesis being involved with the teenager unaware of his actions. To the relief of everyone, the poltergeist seemed to depart when public attention subsides and the teenager grows up. Chapter 15. Some parapsychologists are concerned about the current popularity and even commercialization of ESP, of which I am certainly guilty. But I think it is generally healthy, reflecting public interest. Such interest may be transformed into support for further research and development. Popular writing on the subject, though it is seldom qualified as speculation, does not necessarily do lasting damage except to the egos of a self-appointed few in academia. Aside from my own show, which is entertainment, demonstration, participation, television has made a few other stabs at ESP. The Sixth Sense, a dramatic series, was canceled because of low ratings. It was not very realistic, and I suspect the writers never took time to really explore the field for dramatic possibilities, or the producers had a preconceived notion of what ESP was all about, entangling it with the occult. Much earlier, Vincent Price emceed a short-lived show with pre-tested subjects doing Rhines-type demonstrations. Until the day we measurably expand our knowledge of extrasensory perception, we should utilize what little is known of it, using it without fear and without attacking mysticism to the phenomenon. For this reason, mainly in the early 70s, I put together 2 games involving ESP principles. They're simple enough for children to play, yet are designed to satisfy adult complexities. I can already hear the gasp of conservative psychologists, but I think it is healthy to approach the subject at this point as a game to be played and solved, slicing away as much of the scientific jargon as possible, invading the area staked out, claimed and inflated by a tiny group of theorists who seem to be motivated as much by self-preservation as by research goals. Why should the natural workings of the human mind be discussed in hushed tones or described in terms that few of us can spell, much less understand? Why not use games to explore possibilities? I had a hunch that the public might react favorably to mind games. Then Lou Reddit, who is not above being brash at times, went to Max Hess, owner of the Hess department store in Allentown. He asked Max to introduce the ESP game. Hess agreed, but was startled when Rex said that the debut should take place in New York rather than in Allentown. Hess eventually sponsored it as at the American Hotel in New York, drawing more than 100 press members. Over 2 million copies were sold in less than a year. The public was obviously interested. Whatever the feelings of the parapsychology research, public interest is not apt to wane as long as questions are unanswered. Additionally, people are discovering that despite the tremendous advances in science, technology, and the comforts of living, man's problems are more numerous and not less. Consequently, there is a wider searching, and when man searches, he's likely to turn toward a more inward or spiritual plane, even though ESP may, in essence, be physical. Healthier still, in my mind, or in my opinion, is the vast interest of young people seeking to get away from the crushing technological plane. the outward indifference of much of society, many are deeply interested or even involved in at least one aspect of the field with open-minded analytical approaches. Touring the college circuits week after week, I've seen strong indications of relaxation and realization that drugs are the one foolproof way to destroy society. That the young people can seek inward awareness through meditation and introspection, using the mental approach without Dr. Leary's killing chemical approach. That aspect alone justifies public support. The study of ESP has gone through two stages: the collection of data on spontaneous phenomena, such as the Shingo case, gathered from every source, and the experimental laboratory, without design and intent. Certainly the latter stage has tended to strife advancement of research, the exact opposite of its goal. The precise requirements of pure science, proof along each step of the ladder, and the traditional rigidity of the lab work against chances of success. In this field especially, science must not stay within four walls with a litter of mechanical devices, because the emotional factor, a key ingredient, is often left at the door. Emotions are suppressed, and some of the significant data, such as death-like images and accidental situations, involve emotional ties. Additionally, ESP responses, from my own experience, are easier to come by in a freewheeling atmosphere. Box the mind, and it tends to stay boxed. Of necessity, Dr. Rhine early experiments were in the lab. His ESP cards were hardly complex. Only the data were complex and rocked the academic world, not unexpectedly. The former botanist was attacked shrilly by some, with hard calculations by others. His tests eventually withstood both philosophical and analytical barrages. ESP was coming of age and was awarded a degree of respectability. The 25 cards displays one of five symbols: a cross, a circle, a star, a square, or two small parallel wavy lines. I first tried them in my early teens, and if I was at all uncertain about the existence of psychic phenomena, Dr. Rhine's cards stilled any doubts. The idea was, and still is, for one person to identify by thought perception the symbol of a card picked up and concentrated on by another person. There is visual separation, so facial expressions cannot be read. Mathematics, or even gambler's odds, rule that 5 hits could be discounted as roulette wheel probabilities. Over that percentage is the claimed area of extrasensory perception. In Rhine's published research of tests with 2 assistants separated by buildings, 558 hits were recorded out of a possibility of 1,850 chances. Mathematics challenged the findings, but could not conclusively defeat them. Later, sophistication of tests with ESP cards led Rhine to believe that some individuals had the capability of perceiving the order of the stacked cards without seeing them, even predicting their sequence following a shuffle. I have tried the latter test a number of times, but have not been successful at it. However, I don't doubt that it is possible, and Rhine's statistics indicate the possibility beyond the mathematical probability. From this entire battery of tests, Ryan concluded that there was a possibility of clairvoyance and precognition, as well as the high probability of thought perception. A beginner's version of the Ryan test to measure ESP sensitivity, primarily telepathy sensitivity, can be accomplished with an ordinary deck of playing cards. The tester removes one red card and one black card to even the number to 50. Then the cards are shuffled. A large book is opened and placed on the table as a screen between the tester and the subject, who has been provided with a sheet of paper numbered to 50. On a signal of ready, the tester concentrates about 10 seconds on the color of the card he is holding up, blocked from the subject's view by the book. The subject then writes red or black, depending on the signal he receives from the tester. Each new card is preceded by the ready signal. After the 50 cards have been run out, each placed face down in order of appearance. Score can be counted by corresponding the deck with the subject's numbered sheet. Any score of 35 hits or higher indicates that more than pure chance was involved. It is not an exacting test, but many provide ESP sensitivity information if several runs of the cards indicate consistent scores of 35 or more. Acceptance by science in general and the general public could come about when parapsychologists are able to gather enough data in each area to conclusively prove that PSI, that tangible, intangible key to ESP, does indeed exist. The burden of this is seeking out not only those people thought to have ESP capabilities beyond the average, but correlating a wide range of experiments with PSI as reliable as a thistle with a lunatic fringe involved in the field and quackery rampant. It's a formidable but not hopeless task. Most known psychics have been tested in various labs by experts or by the Society for Psycho Research in London or its cousin in New York, the American Society for Psycho Research. And varied results were obtained. Summary of all the testing seems to be a heartily startling affirmation. Yes, they are psychic. Bedeviling the experts is always the why and how. On 2 occasions, I submitted 2 lab tests. Each time, within minutes, I felt a sharp decrease in whatever ESP capability I have, and I believe it is a personal flaw stemming from the non-lab nature of my work. Perhaps I should have been professional enough to overcome the mechanics or the lack of spontaneity, but I found it impossible. I struggled through the test, knowing that I had a partial block. However, I was always gladly summoned to testing on my home ground of the stage, doing what I normally do. In that role, within a few minutes, I'm not aware I'm being tested. My responses are normal and natural. Astronauts and cosmonauts would probably be ideal laboratory test subjects. They have been conditioned to accept lab procedures and function naturally and normally while undergoing the most complicated scientific probing known to man. Doctrine and mechanics might not affect their psychic responses. To me, one of the most intriguing, perhaps the most exciting area of psychic phenomenon has to do with field forces that are said to exist around all of us, extending beyond our physical bodies but related to them. These same PSI fields are believed to exist around any living tissue and even around certain dead tissue, linking us by fields to animals, vegetable, and mineral. Aura, as applied to the parapsychology, means an emanation from bodies, animated or inanimate, supposedly caused by mental or physical magnetic forces. Our awareness of the aura, in certain cases, is termed field consciousness. According to this theory, we are consciousness of a field force of some type that appears to be paranormal. Current work by physicists, not psychologists, may someday explain what these forces are and how they work. Meanwhile, it is difficult to discount their existence. In support of these theories, most people have encountered a field force at one time or another, in one way or another, attributing it to a strange feeling. The force could have been purely psychic or physical and magnetic. The range of these forces and their categories remain particularly unknown. A think tank in California was recently awarded a $50,000 federal grant for research into the field of consciousness of the philodendron, apparently a very sensitive plant. On the face of it, this would seem to be a senseless piece of research, but the ultimate goal is to decide whether or not the beautiful green-leafed plant can be of help in detecting an aerial hijackers. That some plants may have a thought capacity has been projected by polygraph expert Cleveland Baxter. Some years ago, he attached two galvanic skin-responsive electrodes to the leaves of a philodendron in his office with the idea of burning a leaf for the purpose for possible reaction on a lie detector. The plant reacted before he could strike the match. It perceived his thought and understood what might be a hostile gesture. Incredibly, the polygraph needle jumped. Later tests included two philodendrons witnessing the stomping death of a third. Subsequently, when the murderer entered the room, the two surviving plants registered frantically on the polygraph. To those who shake their heads at Baxter's scientific findings, the question of the green thumb has to be posed. Why does one gardener have lush plants and foliage while his next door neighbor with the same earth, with the same exposure, same earth fertilizer, grows a garden of weeds? Technique enters. But there are gardeners who talk to their plants. Who is to say that there is not a sensitive response? In storm prediction, the sensitivity of certain wildlife is found to be the equal of or better than the U.S. Weather Bureau. And how does a dog sense the demise of his master in a hospital 5 miles away, beginning to wail at almost the instance of death? Research in ESP and PSI will likely go far beyond the human mind. The theory that we are all part of our environment, daily carrying on an undiscovered relationship with it, is not so far-fetched. Neither is the theory that psychic phenomena are simply a part of the total nature of man. And we're going to stop there because the next part, which is part 2, the power of suggestion. And we will continue there on Saturday, which should be the February 23rd. And we will start the next segment of this book. As I said, part 2, the power of suggestion. And in closing, I would like to say that I appreciate all those that show up, and many have. And I enjoy doing this, and that's why I'm doing it. And I hope everyone out there that sees my videos will also enjoy it and come back for more and possibly even get through an entire book with me. So other than that, I will be closing out this meeting and then saying thank you very much for all showing up, and everybody have a great and wonderful day. I thank you. Bye-bye.